So professionalism. We hear so much about the importance of being professional. But what does it actually mean? It's a difficult concept to define because it encompasses so many different things. But in a nutshell, it has to do with the way a person conducts themselves in the workplace. And professionalism is one of those things that's particularly important because a professional and ethical reputation is the difference between success and failure, and often more important than technical excellence. There is not a long list of academic requirements, skills, work experiences that defines what a professional geoscientist is. But this description here will give you some idea of the different hallmarks of a professional. Competence, integrity, accountability, and high ethical standards judged peer-to-peer are the hallmarks of what it means to be part of a professional community. You'll notice there's nothing here that's geoscience specific, but they are universal life skills. Being a professional geoscientist is not about being a geoscientist. It's about being professional in your everyday life. As with engineering, geoscience, and many other international fields of practice, professionalism is based upon three pillars: registration, continuing professional development, and ethics and professional conduct. So the first one, registration. Now, in South Africa, registration falls into two categories. We have statutory registration and also membership of a professional body. So the first question we want to ask is, well, why do we want to be registered? What's the need for it? Well, firstly, it provides a certain level of formal international recognition of the hard work that you have put in to gain knowledge and experience. Also in South Africa, registration with a statutory body is becoming the norm in pretty much every field of practice. Being registered lets your employers, your clients, and the general public know that you've got the required academic qualifications and that you have the practical experience to do the job that you say you do. So it'll give your employers confidence to hire you, knowing that you are who you say you are. And it'll also be of use when you're in the running for promotion. It might give you the edge over somebody who is not registered. Also, as geoscientists, you will somewhere along the line be involved in the estimation of mineral resources and mineral reserves. And so you'll be called on to sign off as a competent person on a public document for a stock exchange generally. And in order to do so, you are going to need to be registered with one or other statutory or professional body. A point I want to make is that registration does not necessarily mean that you are competent or that you will do the job well. It just says that you have the necessary knowledge and skills to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about competence a little bit later in the presentation. So, statutory registration. As geoscientists, according to the SACNASP Act of 2003, all natural scientists are required to be registered. And the SACNASP Act falls under the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. And our minister is Blade Nzimande. And the purpose of SACNASP is to provide a credible professional registration and regulatory body. And it's there to improve the standards rendered by professionals. These are the two important clauses with respect to us. Clause 18.2 tells us that a person may not practice in any of the fields of practice listed in Schedule 1. For us, that means in the geological or earth sciences, unless they are registered. So it is a statutory legal requirement that if you practice as a geoscientist or an earth scientist, you need to be registered with a SACNASP. And specifically, if you act as a consultant, you are required to be registered. Now, this does not mean that only a consultant needs to be registered. Anybody who practices as a geoscientist needs to be registered. So what are the benefits? Well, if you look at what SACNASP provides for us, it's legal compliance, allows you to be recognized as a professional. It increases public confidence and marketability. It has a code of conduct. It also provides input to government. So we as scientists, our requirements, our desires, probably not correct word, but our needs as scientists do get put to government. Doesn't necessarily say that they would do anything about it, but they have been appraised of what our needs are. It also provides networking opportunities. And this is a particularly important one. It gives you preferential rates for professional indemnity insurance. And this is something that's particularly important if you are a consultant. There are also vacancies on the SACNASP website. Network with your peers, again, in the voluntary associations. Facilitate CPD. And it has an online learning platform. So what are the categories that are important to geoscientists? Well, this is where the majority of you would sit at the moment. Many of you who just graduated, who are still getting work experience, will register as candidates. But this is where you want to land up as a professional natural scientist. And what is required there is your 4-year degree, 3 years experience, but there is also possibility of gaining professional status if you only have 10 years of work experience. So it does allow for people who perhaps do not have the academic background, but who have been there and done it for 10 years to also register as professionals. So recently, SACNASP has opened up the idea of student enrollment. So as a final year student, you can enroll at SACNASP as a student member, and I'm under the impression that this is a free enrollment. What it does is it gives you access to what's happening within SACNASP. You can already start to do some CPD. You get an invitation to the events which are hosted by SACNASP. So it gives you a whole idea as to what enrollment or what registration with SACNASP is going to be. And then when you qualify, it's much easier then to register with SACNASP. That was the statutory registration. In other words, it was required. You, by an act of parliament, need to be registered with SACNAS. We also have professional membership with a voluntary association. And neither the GSSA is the professional, it is also a scientific organization. And what that means is that it provides you with a home in Africa so that you can be linked to your community of practice. We are the voluntary association associated with SACNAS that deals with geological and earth scientists. The membership procedures, pretty much the same standard as SACNAS when it comes to qualifications and experience. We don't have a professional exam in order to become a member, but we do promote workshops on professionalism like the one that we are now, and also CPD, which is coming up in March of next year. Our frame of reference is the Constitution, which has a code of ethics and a complaints process. And everything within it is benchmarked against international geoscience practice. Okay, you have seen this one, and this highlights some of the basic services that we provide to our members. Familiarize yourself with what is available to you as a member of the GSSA. But also remember, and with apologies to JFK and Alan West, it's not all about what your voluntary association can do for you. It's also about what you as professional geoscientists can contribute to the industry. And here I'm specifically thinking in terms of providing mentorship to younger members, and also being role models and examples in terms of professional activity. All of our costs at the GSSA have to be covered by membership fees. And obviously we try to keep these as low as possible. And so we are eternally grateful for our annual sponsors and also for specific event sponsors. Okay, we spoke earlier or mentioned earlier that simply because you registered either with SACNAS or with the GSSA does not necessarily mean that you are competent. So what's the difference? Well, if you are registered, this tells people that you have the academic qualifications that you say that you have. It tells them that you have the work experience that you say that you do. It also tells them that you have sufficient practical or technical experience to do the job. Competence, however, that tells them that you can actually do the job. Okay, so competence generally is described as being the intersection between knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And this is often compared to an iceberg, where knowledge and skills, this is the bit that other people can see, is only a small proportion of what makes us competent. By far the larger proportion is down to our attitudes. These are our values, our personal standards, our beliefs, our ethics. And just like a normal iceberg, Majority of these are not seen by others, except when they let us down. Okay, so in this competency iceberg, knowledge. Knowledge is based on qualifications. Now, most of you today here have already got your degree, which should give you knowledge, but not always. Nor does it mean that if you do know what to do, that you can do it well. And once again, once you've acquired knowledge, you can't stagnate. Look at this quote here. We can, in times of change, the learners shall inherit the earth. The learned find themselves beautifully prepared to deal with a world that no longer exists. We can never stop learning, or we're going to very quickly be out of date. And we'll have a look a bit more in detail at that in the next section on CPD. Skills. Skills refer to the ability to apply our knowledge to specific situations. You can't develop skills without knowledge. Knowledge is, it's information that you've learned, whereas skills imply something more practical. It's something that you learn in order to be able to carry out your job functions. Now, simplistically, we can divide skills into two sections: hard or technical skills, and then soft skills. Hard skills refer to the technical knowledge or the training that you've gone through. Typically, these are the occupational skills that are taught in a classroom and are generally job specific. Examples might be what software programs are you familiar with? Design analysis, design skills, database management, project management, and so forth. Soft skills are non-technical skills that don't always relate directly to your job description as a geoscientist. They are general characteristics. They're often called transferable skills or interpersonal skills. And these include such things as communication skills, critical thinking, decision-making abilities, a wide variety of management, business, and leadership skills. I want to refer you to the study done here some years ago by researchers at Harvard, Carnegie, and Stanford that showed that only 15% of job success is related to technical or hard skills. A whopping 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft skills and interpersonal skills. Now, geoscientists are often hardwired to the practical aspects of their job, and they're generally very good at all the technical skills. And developing these soft skills is something that you will need to work on obtaining. There's a time element involved in becoming proficient at something. By and large, the more you do something, the longer you do something, the better you should be at doing it. However, having said, simply because a person has been doing something for 20 years does not necessarily mean that they are proficient at it. And over the years of your career, you are going to meet individuals who have been around for many years. Might be in senior positions. They might even be your boss. They've been around for a long time, but they may not necessarily be proficient at what they do. The time taken to become proficient is not going to be the same time for everyone, or even every skill. Some people will become proficient at a particular skill in a short time, while others might take a little bit longer to get there. Or you might become proficient at one skill very quickly, but another skill might take many years to master. Just remember that everybody started at the bottom. And the expert, well, they're not somebody who knows it all, but someone who knows just how little they do know. So looking at the attitudes, be the attitude you want to be around. These are some of the attitudes that employers will look at. A strong work ethic, responsibility, taking responsibility, integrity, honesty, reliability, accountability, adaptability or flexibility, self-motivation, confidence, but not being arrogant, loyalty, compassion, empathy, patience, having a positive attitude and respect for others, being polite, being modest, having a passion for your subject, and being grateful, or rather not being a narcissist self-entitlement attitude. None of these are geoscience specific. These are attitudes that you will need in all aspects of your life if you want to be the person that other people want to have around in their companies. Okay, so the second pillar that we will look at is continuing professional development. So why do we need to continue learning? Surely once you've got your degree, we know enough to do the job. Well, knowledge has a half-life. Whether that half-life be 8 years or whatever, we all pretty soon start to realize that if we don't keep up with what is happening in our field of practice, you're going to fall behind and become irrelevant. So if you want to be up to date and relevant in your chosen field, you need to continue professional development throughout your working life. Now, I'm sure all of you can think of some of the skills and the knowledge that has changed since you left school or since you started university. For me, a fairly long list of things that have changed. The GPS versus the compass. We used a compass. Today we use GPSs. Presentation using a PowerPoint. We used to use slide projector back in the day. We started off writing documents on a typewriter, which then moved to a word processor. And now we have computers doing it. Things like mainframe computers versus laptops. When you're out in the field, you were using a radio. Now we use cell phones. Just as these things change, if you don't keep up with how to use the latest technology or how to understand what is happening in your field, you are going to be left behind. So CPD, continuous professional development, therefore, it's a term used to describe learning activities. This could include courses, workshops, informal learning opportunities, or any sort of education that helps to expand your knowledge or add new skills related to your career. It refers to the process of tracking and documenting skills, knowledge, and experience. It's It's a logbook of what you learned throughout your working life. Something that you could keep on a physical piece of paper, an Excel spreadsheet, online. It doesn't matter where you keep track of your professional activities. You need to do them and you need to keep track of them some way. Important to notice that it is a self-directed program. It is something that you decide what you need to do. It's not determined by your employer. It's not determined by the registration authority. You decide what you need to learn in order to develop your career. Most professional organizations will have an online portal to allow you to log your CPD credits. And many of these are structured so that you only need to follow one program. For example, SACNASP and Jssa have an MOU that allows you to do only one. You don't have to log your points with both SACNASP and Jssa. You just do it on one system, and doing that will get you accredited in the other system as well. Now, CPD is not only for geoscientists who work in industry, it's just as applicable to people employed in academic research and even governmental or statutory institutions. So for us as geoscientists and earth scientists, there are two ways that you can go. If you decide to log your points through SACNASP, very briefly, it's a 5-year CPD cycle. You will need 25 credits over those 5 years. And the current cycle runs from April of this year to March 2027. There are 3 categories where you can claim your credits. And you need to obtain credits in at least 2 and at least 1 credit per year from category 1. These are the 2 gentlemen whose contact details you should be writing down. Toby works at SACNASP. If you have any questions on the program, speak to Toby, whereas Johan is the technical guy. So if you have issues with logging it on the website, Johan is the person to contact. Just very briefly, these are the categories. Category 1 is formal learning. Category 2 is work-based activities and candidate mentoring. And category 3 are individual activities and also membership of a voluntary association. This is the situation at the GSSA. We have 4 different categories of CPD: formal learning, knowledge contribution, self-directed study or informal learning, and also professional practice. Here, no category is obligatory, but we do recommend people to collect points as far as possible as they can across the spectrum. In March, there will be a detailed CPD course through the GSSA. If you want to know more on how to log your points, what you can claim, please log in for that course. It will also be a free course. You can also log into the GSSA website. There are a couple of documents talking about the GSSA CPD program. Right, so the third pillar then is ethics and professional conduct. We'll come back to ethics a little bit later on. I want to spend some time now looking at conduct that might be considered professional or non-professional, as the case may be. Well, here is a list of just some of the behaviors that will impact on our being perceived as professional. Again, it's important to note that these are just as applicable in academic and industry environments. It doesn't matter whether you continue your career in academia or whether you work on a mine or in a consulting business. These professional behaviors will be expected of you. In fact, pretty much all of these behaviors are applicable even if you move out of the direct geoscience field. Okay, so the first one is coping with undue influence. You can be sure that being involved with mining, you will at some stage come face to face with interference from some powerful group or another. In some instances, it's likely to be political. For example, in coal, issues of the unions wanting to keep jobs versus ESG activists who want to shut down coal operations. More often, however, it's going to be direct or indirect pressure exerted by various stakeholders. Sometimes it's going to be your company boss or corporate shareholders wanting to maximize profits. Other times it might be local communities, suppliers, subcontractors, each one with their own agenda. Also, what happens when the company or the client asks you to write a favorable report for a significant sum of money, even though you know the project is rubbish? Remember, if you don't do as they request, you might not get paid for it. Or at the very least, you won't get asked to do another job for this client. Probably one of the most difficult situations to deal with is when you may have to make a choice between doing a job that you are not quite capable of doing and not doing the job at all. And this is a particularly difficult issue to deal with if you are unemployed. But how you deal with all of these issues says a lot about your professional attitude. Insider trading. Working as a geoscientist, you are going to be privy to confidential company information. For example, you may know that your company is about to open a new mine. That's going to cause the stock price to rise. Or you might come to know that they're going to be taken over by a foreign company and the shares are going to be worthless. Insider trading regulations would prevent you from acting on that information by buying or selling your shares. Just to note, these same regulations do not prevent you from holding shares in the company that you work for. Sometimes a company code of conduct will specify the number of shares that you can hold without declaring your holdings. But typically, the normal investor will hold these shares as part of a greater portfolio or one that is managed by an investment company. That is not what we're talking about. Where the insider trading regulations come in is that they would prevent you from buying or selling your shares on the basis of information that's not in the public domain, on the basis of information that you have obtained because of your job and that the general public will not have access to. It's also important to remember that these regulations wouldn't only apply to you as the geoscientist, but it would also prevent you from passing this information on your elderly parents, to your brother who has recently lost his job, to a friend who has a family with a new baby to care for. Insider trading is a very real issue out there, and we do have access to a lot of proprietary information, so do be very careful how you use it. Research integrity. It's not just an academic concept. Over your career, you will do a fair amount of research. You will work with both junior and senior colleagues, also peers on various reports, whether it be for your employers or for clients. Make sure that you present accurate results, not just the results you know they want you to write. You might also get involved in reviewing academic theses or other journal papers. You want to be fair and honest, even if you don't necessarily agree with their conclusions. And what we're talking about here is agreeing with them on a personal level, obviously not on a factual basis. So how you interact with the people you're working with and how you deal with real or potential conflicts of interest in these situations says a lot about our professionalism. Well, we all know that plagiarism is one of the most unforgivable academic sins. Well, plagiarism in the work environment is no more acceptable. And we all know the common types of plagiarism that are out there. Remember, plagiarism is not a legal issue, but it is an ethical issue. By contrast, copyright infringement not only is an ethical issue, but it is also a legal issue. And realistically, copyright infringements are just so easy. Picture from the website. We'll just photocopy the chapter of the book, and we justify it because the price of books is so ridiculous. We can't afford to buy the book. We're just students, or we're unemployed, or have just started working and have so many other more important expenses. It's not okay. Copyright infringement is against the law. Next couple of slides look at the issues that individuals might face with respect to harassment, bullying, and discrimination. And we come across these issues in many places. In the formal workplace setting, out in the field, at conferences, in educational environment, and also in cyberspace. And this is not just for teenagers. More and more, this is happening to adults as well. There are a number of ways highlighted here as to how harassment can be experienced, and also discrimination. And what I want to highlight here is that the Jssa has a formal position on these issues. It's reference to the Code of Ethics and the complaints and disciplinary process. And we also have a membership and transformation portfolio to address these specific issues. One of the issues I want to highlight is that of sexual harassment. You're all geoscientists, and you will be working in a male-dominated environment. Gentlemen, how you treat your female colleagues, peers, juniors, and superiors, especially in the company of other men, says a lot about you as a professional. Treat your female colleagues like you would treat a lady of your family. Ladies, how you treat your male counterparts is no less important. Again, treat them with respect and dignity. Another aspect I want to touch on is how you as professional geoscientists treat those in the industry who cannot advance your career. Here I'm referring to people such as junior colleagues and non-geoscientists, students, contractors, admin staff, cleaners, gardeners. Do you treat them all with the same courtesy and respect as you do your seniors in your organization? The simple answer is treat everyone with the same dignity and respect that you would like them to treat you. And then just a question I would like everybody to consider in any given situation. You didn't get the job. You didn't get the promotion. You didn't get the recognition. Is it always discrimination? It's a sad thing to accept, but sometimes you're just not the best person for the job, and somebody else is. The next thing I want to address is mentoring. It's a very special way of contributing to the continuity of education of the next generation. And it's something that we encourage all professionals to volunteer for. There are many professional bodies that have formal structures. Jssa, SAIMM, SACNASP, Jsa, WIMSA, Bridge the Gap. We also have many of the larger companies that will have formal programs in place. But probably the most amount of mentoring, coaching, training, and tutoring will take place in informal settings. In any program, we always have far more mentee applications than we have mentors. And that is why I include this mantra that was first coined in the surgery field. See one, do one, teach one. Make yourself available for mentorship. Initially as a mentee. Then take the time to build your career and gain experience. But don't forget to come back and volunteer as a mentor to help the next generation. Okay, something we don't often think about with respect to professional behaviors, but that is how we dress. And how we manage our time. Okay, so a couple of questions to ask yourself when you get dressed in the morning. And I should have a poll here. Okay, so the first question, and I just want you to put a simple yes or no in the poll that is coming up. Does what you wear say anything about your competence? Just put your answer in there. We still have a couple of more people to go. Okay, so the question again, does what you wear say anything about your competence? I need some more people to put their answer in, please. Okay, so you can see the answer there. It's pretty much 50-50. Does what you wear say anything about your competence? Does it say anything about how well you do your job? Well, the short answer is no, it doesn't. What you wear has absolutely nothing to do with how good you are at doing your job. Right, so now the second question, and again, we're going to have that same poll. The next question is, does your dress say anything about how professional you are? Okay. Don't put your answer in the chat. Please put it in the poll. Okay, so that's the results of that question. 93% of people answered yes. And that is 100% correct. While what you wear doesn't say anything about how well you do your job, but it does say something about your professionalism. There is nothing that says that a professional always needs to wear a suit or skirt and heels. It has to do with what is appropriate for the job at hand. In other words, if you're out mapping beach deposits like I tend to do, and you pitched up there in a dress suit, be very worried about your sanity, never mind your professionalism. But at the same time, it wouldn't be appropriate to wear shorts or casual clothes to accept an award at a prestigious gala dinner event. So again, it comes back to what is appropriate. What we wear is also important when doing presentations or going for a job interview, whether it be live or online. You must be the star of the show, not what you're wearing. You don't want to be wearing anything less casual than your audience. Remember, you're working in the mining industry and you're typically going to be asking somebody for money. So conservative is generally more appropriate. Investors, bankers, lawyers, senior management really don't care about your individual style. They want to hear the professional you. There's nothing wrong with expressing your individuality through fashion in private. But unless your presentation or your job interview is in front of a hip, fashionable audience, and last time I looked, the mining industry is neither hip nor fashionable, it's best to stick to a professional dress code. So a thought also on video conferencing. We spend a lot of time in video conferences these days. Even with contact events coming back into fashion, you will still spend a lot of time in virtual events or having online meetings with clients and colleagues all over the world. So please, no duck-faced selfies and sexy or suggestive poses is not appropriate. Depending upon the situation, informal photographs, rather have a head and shoulders photograph or your company logo or your LinkedIn or company QR code. My personal hate session is when somebody logs in and they called Samsung Galaxy or Talita's iPhone. You don't know who you are. Please make sure that you name yourself correctly. And just a word on it. We have a multitude of different cultures that we deal with, not only in Africa, but internationally when we have video conferences. And different people's culture varies. Some people will put their name first and their surname second, or vice versa. And if you don't know the culture of the person that you're dealing with, you don't know what is their name and what is their surname. So it can often be useful to put your surname in capital letters, whether it be before or afterwards. And of course, there are also certain circumstances where it would be useful to have your company or organization also on your name. How we manage our time also says a lot about how we are perceived. And here are some issues to pay attention to. Are you on time? Or are you always that guy who is always late for everything? Who, no matter what time the meeting is, always comes in 10 minutes late? What about this seminar now? At 9 o'clock, we had 23 delegates who had logged in. There are currently 35 delegates. Yes, there are occasions when you are going to be late for a very good reason. It's polite to let the host know what the situation is. To just pitch up 10 minutes late because whatever is not professional. And when you're at a meeting, are you present? Do you pay attention? Or do you spend all your time on your phone or doing something else while the meeting is in progress? Are you productive? Being productive is not just about getting a certain amount of work done in a given period of time. It's also about using less to create more, to work smarter, not necessarily harder. And finally, how do you manage your time productivity and efficiency while working from home. In all of our lives, there are things that are important, and there are things that are urgent. There are also things that are important, but not urgent. And there are things that are neither urgent nor important. So what do we spend most of our time on? We need to analyze our own life and prioritize accordingly. It's the only way to get everything done. And if we still don't have time for everything, take stuff out of the non-urgent and not important box and dump them. I'm sure many of you will have seen this experiment. To take a large glass jar and then fill it with rocks, sand, water, and pebbles. How much you get into the jar says a lot about your time management. So how do you fill your jar? Do you put the sand and the pebbles in first? Or do you put big rocks in first and then the sand, or then the pebbles and then the sand? If we want to get the best out of a limited amount of time, we need to get our priorities right. You want to schedule the important tasks, and these are represented by the rocks. These are the big things in our lives. Goals or our objectives would include our direct families, our spouses, our children, and also our jobs, our goals in our career. Second, we would put the pebbles. These are the important and urgent tasks, sort of like finishing the assignment that's sitting on your desk, or getting your technical report submitted by the due date. But it also includes taking care of our emotional and spiritual well-being, including taking care of certain extended family obligations. Next, we have the sand. These are the myriads of things that we have in our lives that distract us from accomplishing the big things. These are going to include leisure activities and other important or unimportant, non-urgent, often trivial time wasters, like checking our social media, hanging out at the mall. It's all the things that we would much rather be doing other than work. These are the fun things in life. Yes, there is place for all of these things, but that place is not first place. Just a note, once you'd filled up your jar, if you took some water and poured it in, there would still be space. So there is always time for a beer with your buddies. But remember, it is water. It's not a rock. It's not one of the priorities of life. Then a couple of things that we don't always think about in terms of professionalism. That is geovandalism. We're all aware of the destruction and vandalism that takes place on national heritage sites. And I think of places such as Canteen Copy near Berkeley West, the name plaques at Cape Point or Dwarsrivier, and various graffiti and vandalism at geoheritage sites. But what about other situations? Does it matter if it's a national heritage site or just a rock? What's the difference between research and drilling holes because it's fun? Illegal mining is a scourge that is taking place not only in South Africa, but in various countries worldwide. Now, we're generally used to seeing the Zama-Zamas working small scale or in fairly large cooperatives. But one of the things that we are seeing in this country more and more, actually, fair amount of big yellow machinery pitching up at operations and following mining scenes. And there's a perception that there must be involvement by geoscientists in some way or another. Just be aware that this is taking place and that being involved with any sort of illegal mining is, well, not only is it illegal, but it's highly unprofessional as well. Okay, so the three pillars that we have looked at: registration, continuing professional development, and professional conduct. Okay, folks, welcome back. And this is the section where we look at ethics and codes of ethics. Okay, so this is a fairly well-known ethical dilemma. And I don't need you to put your hands up or anything, but I would like you to think to yourself how you would deal with this particular situation. What this dilemma tells us is that we have got a train running down the tracks, and it's out of control. It has no brakes. There's no ways for you to stop it, to put the brakes on, or anything like that. Down the track, there are 5 people. They don't work for the company. They are just 5 random people who happen to be in the way of the train. This is you over here. And you can pull that lever and send the train down here. However, down here, there is a worker who is working on the line. And so the question is, what do you do? Do you let the train run on and kill the 5 people? Do you pull the lever and kill the 1 person working on the tracks? This is a situation that has no right answer. There's nothing else that you can do. So in your own mind, how would you react in this particular situation? Would it make a difference to your way of thinking if the 1 person, this person here, was a child, an older person? Would it make a difference if you knew this 1 person and these people were strangers? Or vice versa? Does it make a difference if this person is actually a worker for the company and these are just random civilians? Would you make the same decision if these people were of a different race, tribe, gender, or nationality? Is there a difference between allowing someone to die by not pulling that lever, or by making a positive choice to kill somebody, as in pulling the lever and letting this person die? The second aspect of this same dilemma: here's your train, here are your people on the track. And say you are on a bridge with a very large fat person. If you pushed him off the bridge, he would fall on the track and possibly stop the train. Is there a difference between pushing the fat man or flipping the switch, as in the previous slide? And finally, would you jump onto the tracks to try and stop the train and save them? Now, the way in which you have thought or reasoned to get your answers in the previous example is the result of your personal ethics. Now, when we look at ethics, we have a hierarchy. Meta-ethics, this is now the branch of metaphysical philosophies that looks at moral judgment. It deals with what is right, what is good, what is the nature of justice, who gets to decide what's right and why, and should it be imposed on anybody else? And that's all we're going to say about meta-ethics. The second field is normative ethics, and this looks at ideas about what is good and bad, at how people make decisions regarding what is right and what is wrong. Meta-ethics looks at what is right, what is wrong, whereas normative ethics looks at how we make decisions. And very briefly, there are a number of different theories as to how people make decisions. These here focus on the consequences which your action might have. So when you make choices which result in the correct consequences, you're acting morally. Because the big question is, well, who gets to decide what the correct consequences are? Another group of ethical theories, these don't focus on the consequences, but they look more at what is your duty, what is the right thing to do. And again, who decides? What are the correct rules to follow? Another variety of theories, these emphasize the role of character and virtue rather than doing your duty or acting in order to bring about good consequences. We also have issues of, or theories of fundamentalism, where we would look to somebody else to provide us with ethical guidance. Or do we simply want to decide for ourselves what is right and what is wrong? Irrespective of how we make our decisions, defining what is right or wrong is a very different thing. It requires that we look at the situation and make a value judgment, which is always subjective. And it depends upon things such as our background, our culture, our religious convictions, our historical experiences, and so forth. We look at such concepts as fairness and justice, which are not always easy to define. And because we always have different life experiences, this will impact on our view as to what is fair and what is right. So who's right? If everybody in a society has a different view of what is right or just, and they all have their own sets of values and their own way of making decisions, this can only cause chaos and conflict. And in most instances, this is where either society, an employer, or an organization will create a set of accepted norms for that society. And this is where we get into the world of applied ethics. And we find them all over the place. Things such as research ethics, business ethics or corporate governance, geo ethics, and professional ethics. Now, one of the differences between pure ethics, these things here that we've just touched on, and applied ethics, is that these are generally voluntary and they can vary dramatically across communities. Whereas professional ethics, applied ethics, are generally more formal and are obligatory. I just want to have a look at two of these, geoethics, and then we'll move on to professional ethics, where we will spend the majority of our time. Geoethics looks at the broader picture and sees what are the social roles and responsibilities of geoscientists. And the purpose, the whole aim of geoethics is to foster excellence within the geosciences and to improve the quality of professional work. These are based on pure ethics principles, and they're typically not enforceable. And I just want to very briefly show you the Cape Town Statement of Geoethics, which was developed in 2016, 2017 at the IGS, which was held in Cape Town. And these are the principles of geoethics. Not going to go through them. You can read them yourself. Just to know that the GSSA had a significant input into the development of the statement of geoethics. But we're going to be spending most of our time looking at professional ethics. This is the formal, structured world of the registered geoscientists. While they might be based on principles of ethics and also geoethics, they are obligatory to any members of any organization that has a structured code of ethics. And it is generally backed by a robust complaints and disciplinary process. Now, fortunately, geoscientists are seldom going to be called upon to make ethical life and death decisions. But sometimes your actions will impact on the lives or livelihood of others. Here is a list of things that you are most likely to deal with in your career. And believe me when I say that you will encounter at least one or two, probably more of these over the years. Things like ensuring legal compliance, whistleblowing, conflicts of interests, bribery and kickbacks, moonlighting, and plagiarism and copyright issues. So in the world of professional ethics, we have a hierarchy of codes. At the top, we have the code of ethics, which behaves like a constitution. It has general principles to guide behaviors. It's very much a set of principles. Next, we have the code of conduct. And what the code of conduct does is it takes the code of ethics and applies those principles to a bunch of specific situations. So, for example, one of the codes of, clause in a code of ethics might say that you must obey the law. The code of conduct will then list several specific laws that you would need to obey. You will find different codes of conduct in different aspects of life. There'll be one at the university. The GSSA has one. SACNASP has one. Companies that you work for will have one. Now, while these codes might differ in the detail, they are never going to be contrary to each other. Typically, if you obey one, you'll be in harmony with all the others. And finally, we have the code of practice. And a code of practice is specific to a particular practice or competency. So a company that you work for would have one code of conduct or code of ethics, but it may have many codes of practice. And some of the other ones that you will find will deal with resource and reserve estimation, mining health and safety, risk management, employment equity. And I specifically want to highlight the South African mineral reporting codes, because this is the code of practice that you will all have to deal with at some stage of your career. Okay, so we go back to the situation then that a company has a code of ethics and a code of conduct. What happens if we transgress it? Either by accident or by choice, because we might not agree with what that code says, because our ethics allows us to do something else. So again, in order for things not to get out of hand, most societies or organizations are going to have a process in place to enforce the generally accepted norms. And typically accepting the society's or organization's code of conduct will be a condition of membership or employment. I'm going to talk specifically now about the GSSA, which has a complaints and disciplinary process. It is referenced to the code of ethics, code of conduct. Anybody out there, public, other members, can lodge a complaint. But if they do, it has to be referred to a specific code, a specific clause within the code of conduct. Typically, cases would be handled internally within the GSSA, but they may be passed on to SACNAS or even to the judicial system if absolutely necessary. So how do you avoid a complaint? Simple answer is act ethically all the time, even when you think nobody else is watching. The whole purpose of the complaint process is not to beat people about the ears. It's there to self-regulate the profession. It's to improve behaviors. We're not out to punish people who make honest mistakes. It's trying to avoid dishonesty, reckless incompetence. But this is a particularly important one. It is not a forum to settle private scores or professional and academic differences of personal opinion. Simply because you don't agree with somebody else's opinion, that's not the basis of a professional complaint. And unfortunately, it is sad to say we see a significant amount of complaints which are petty issues. So what do you do when you have a difference of opinion? You don't go to a formal complaint. You can act like an adult and approach the person privately and discuss the matter, discuss the issue. If you feel that you are not able to approach them directly, perhaps it's your boss or somebody more senior in the organization, ask somebody senior to go along with you to assist you with it. And it's only if it is only if all else fails, that is when you go to a formal complaint. Okay, so what are the clauses of the Jssa Code of Ethics? First and foremost, it's important to understand that ethical behavior is not simply about following rules. It's also about complying with ethical principles in all aspects of your professional and personal life. You're going to encounter situations where there are no hard and fast rules, or the rules might not be clear, and you might have to make your own decision. As a responsible professional, you must be able to identify potential ethical issues and then create solutions to them. The Jssa Code of Ethics is benchmarked against international geoscience organizations. And if you are a member of the GSSA, you are obliged to comply with the Code of Professional Conduct. You can find the GSSA Code of Ethics on the website. Please download it. Keep it filed in a safe place, because you are going to encounter situations in your career where you will need to refer to them. And again, just to reiterate that simply being registered with being a member of the GSSA means that you agree to abide by this code and that you are subject to them. But so the preamble to the code tells us what it is that we are looking for. We are looking to prevent breaches without dishonesty, intent, repetition, or reckless incompetence. And if these circumstances are found, it's just personal counseling and admonition. It's only when we get to serious breaches that we might move along to things like suspension, expulsion, or publication. So clause 1 tells us that in conducting their professional activities, the responsibility of members for the welfare, health, and safety of the community shall at all times come before the responsibility to the profession, to sectional or private interests, clients or employers, or to other members. So that there is the first clause in the Code of Ethics. The next slide shows us what that actually means in detail. So you would avoid assignments that might create a conflict between the interests of your client and the public interest. Excuse me. You would work in a manner such as not to jeopardize the public wealth, health, or safety. Maintain technological services essential to public welfare. Promote the well-being of the community. And if your judgment is overruled in this matter, inform your client or employer of the possible consequences, and if appropriate, notify the proper authority of the situation. So it's not a case of, I was just doing my job. You have responsibilities that transcend simply doing your job. Clause 2. Members shall at all times act so as to uphold and enhance the honesty, honor, integrity, and dignity of the profession. So in detail, you would not be involved with any business or professional practice that is known to be of fraudulent or dishonest nature. You would not use an association with other persons, corporations, or partnerships to conceal unethical acts and relationships. You would not knowingly continue in partnership with, nor act in professional matters with any person who has been removed from the membership of the society because of unprofessional conduct. When called upon to give professional advice, provide an opinion that is objective and reliable and to the best of your knowledge and ability. And once you've given that advice, and if you become aware that it will not be followed, take reasonable steps to ensure that people ignoring your advice are aware of the danger or other serious consequences which may result. Please, folks, as we go along with this, if you have any questions that relate to any of these clauses while we're going through them, please put your hand up at that time. Okay, clause 3. Members shall not take on the functions of an expert in fields other than their own, or accept professional obligations that they are not competent to discharge. So you would inform your employer or client and make appropriate recommendations on obtaining further advice if an assignment requires qualifications and experience outside of their field of competence. As we mentioned earlier, this is a particularly difficult one because it might mean that you may need to turn down work. In an environment where employment is scarce, you might want to do that job. But if you don't have the ability to do it, don't take it on. So it's contrary to the Code of Ethics. In the provision of professional services, you wouldn't describe yourself or allow you to be described as a consultant or a contractor unless you are registered with SACNAS, occupy a position of professional independence, are prepared to work in an as an unbiased and independent advisor. You would also not give a professional opinion, report, or legal testimony without being thoroughly informed to what might be reasonably expected, what the purpose of the opinion, report, testimony is, and the degree of completeness of information upon which it is based should be made clear. In other words, don't tell people that you know more than you do know. Members shall build their professional reputation on merit and shall not compete unfairly. So you would only approach prospective clients or employers with due regard for their professional integrity and this code of ethics. Engagement on the basis of merit. Adequate and appropriate remuneration for professional staff, and terms of employment which have the approval of the profession's appropriate association. Do not attempt to supplant another, employed or consulting, who has been appointed. Okay, there is a question. In a situation where your employer has tasked you with something that will affect the well-being of a community in future, and you should not do it, your employment will be terminated. How does one seek help from the Jssa or a relevant authority? In most cases, anything affecting the community could be reported to the nearest municipality, or there are various NGOs that might be able to assist. The reality of this situation is exactly as you said it there, Ntokozo. You might be fired for doing what is right. And no, you won't be able to claim compensation for being let go from the GSSA or from SACNAS or from anybody else. You might be able to go to the CCMA. That would be a situation that you could deal with. Nobody is saying that the code of ethics is going to be easy to apply. And you have to figure out for yourself you're told by the code of ethics what you should be doing. And you need to then make your own ethical decision on that basis. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Okay, so we come back to this one. Do not attempt to supplant another employed at consulting who has been appointed. If you know somebody else has got or has been appointed for a job, you wouldn't go to the employer and say, hire me instead. I have got better qualifications. I can do the job better. If you're doing consulting work, you wouldn't undertake work on a basis that involves an undisclosed speculative fee or remuneration that is conditional on the implementation of the work. unless fully disclosed. That is the important term there. Nobody says that you can't take work that involves a speculative fee, but you would need to disclose that in the document that you're writing so that people who read it will know that you are being paid if this thing goes ahead. So they know how to read that document. You would also not falsify or misrepresent your own or anybody else's experience and qualifications. And you wouldn't, either on purpose or by accident, injure the reputation of somebody else. You would not use any advantage of a particular position that you have to compete unfairly with somebody else. Shall exercise due restraint in explaining your own work and refrain from unfair, unjustified criticism of the work of another. Unfair and unjustified criticism. If somebody else's work is, see, there's a question there. How do you deal with continued non-conformances to good corporate governance in the SAMREC code, especially with us working for unlisted junior mining companies? Whatever one flags as a material risk or non-conformance often gets ignored. That's so true. There are many cases where you will never be able to do anything about it. If you're not in a position to be able to change the governance of the company. The important thing is you need to identify it and you need to put it to the powers that be, preferably in writing. You have identified the issue, but it is above your pay grade to actually implement it. Then the decision is yours. Do you continue working for them knowing that these issues are happening? Or do you walk away to a different company? That is not covered within the Code of Ethics. That is up to your personal ethics to decide. You are happy with that, Fusi? Okay, we would give proper credit for professional work and acknowledge the contribution of subordinates and others. Refrain from plagiarism. Anything that you say and write. Also not submit the same professional for publication in more than one peer-reviewed journal. And make proper use of circumspect advertising. Making sure that any information in your advertising, which includes your CV, is truthful, factual, and free from embellishments. Clause 5. Members shall apply their skill and knowledge in the interests of their employer or client, for whom they shall act in professional matters as faithful agents or trustees. So what that means is you want to avoid conflicts of interest. Always keep your employer or your client informed on all matters which could lead to a potential conflict of interest. Where there is a conflict of interest, let your employer or your client know that there is this potential conflict of interest. And then, depending upon the situation, withdraw yourself from any decision that can cause these two organizations to come into conflict. You would want to be impartial when administering any contract. But this acting impartially would not prevent you from applying everything that you have in the best interests of the employer or your client. Shall not accept compensation, financial or otherwise, from more than one party for services on the same project, unless the circumstances are fully disclosed to and agreed by all interested parties. So you wouldn't do one bit of work and sell it to two different people unless both of them know about it and are happy with it. Neither solicit nor accept financial or other valuable considerations. No bribery. Neither take nor give a bribe. Again, you wouldn't solicit or accept gratuities when dealing with clients or employers for the work which they are responsible. So again, you wouldn't accept a bribe from a contractor, a client who says, I will give you this if you do that for me. And this is a particularly important one, particularly if you are working for a junior company or if you are in consulting. Advise your client or employer when, as a result of your studies, you believe that a project will not be viable. It's often very, very tempting for a consultant to continue on doing work on a project, even when they know that the project has got nowhere to go. Tell your client what you believe about the project. If the client comes back to you and says, well and good, but we would still like you to do the work, then there's no problem. But don't lead them on believing that this might be a great project when you know in your heart of hearts that it's got nowhere to go. Do not disclose or use confidential information without express permission. And do not, without a good reason, destroy calculations or other evidence required for the verification of your work. Okay, clause 6. Members shall give evidence, express opinions, or make statements in an objective and truthful manner and on the basis of adequate knowledge. Meaning, your professional reports will always be objective and accurate. Your opinions based on adequate knowledge and technical competence. And if you know of anything which could be taken as a potential conflict of interest. Make it known to people. Members shall continue their professional development throughout their careers and shall actively assist and encourage those under their direction to advance their knowledge and experience. Okay, we've spoken pretty much about this in continuing professional development. The Code of Ethics tells us that we need to do this. So we would maintain personal competence by doing CPD. We would encourage others to do CPD. And we would even assist others and organizations to keep up with their CPD. When members are involved in preparing public reports or portions thereof, or mining and exploration companies, the members shall comply with all laws and government regulations relating to the minerals industry and with the rules, regulations, and practices as established and promulgated by the stock exchanges with respect to the official listing requirements for mining and/or other companies within the country in which one is working. So initially, you would need to inform yourself of the laws and regulations related to the minerals industry in South Africa or in the country that you are working. So you need to know what it is that you are required to do in the country where you are working, be it South Africa or be it elsewhere. You would need to observe the requirements of the stock exchanges in respect of reports on mineral explorations and assessments, and this particularly refers to the requirements for a competent person on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So again, you would need to know and observe the JSE listing rules and also how the SAM codes, whether it be SAMREC, SAMVAL, SAMOG, SAMESC, whichever one of the codes refers to the type of work that you are doing. If we go back and have a look at this one, inform themselves of the laws and regulations of other countries. What happens if the rules of the country that you are working in are very, very lax or contradict basic human rights? If you went along with it, you would be informing yourself of the laws of that country, and you would be applying those laws. Would that be enough? You answer that one. And this goes further, that members shall comply with all relevant laws and regulations of any country that they work in, including laws, regulations, policies, and practices regarding intellectual property. So again, you would inform yourself of the relevant laws, conventions, and regulations here and elsewhere, and also observe all of these regulations relating to intellectual property. For example, ownership of a report prepared for a company normally would remain with the company and not the author. So if you're writing a report for company XYZ, that information that report belongs to that company. It doesn't revert to you as the author. Okay, so we've now gone through the code of conduct. And before we move on, does anybody have any additional questions, comments about the actual code of ethics and the application that we've spoken about so far? Either it's as clear as mud or everybody's gone off to go and have some tea somewhere. Okay, so let's have a look at a number of case studies. And I want you to think as to how you would react under each of these specific cases. And feel free to comment out loud as well if you wish. Okay, so the first situation. You're out at dinner, or you hear your team members plan a dinner at an expensive restaurant. And the team leader says, I'll expense it. No one will know because we still have money in the project budget. What should you do? Do you go along? Because you can't afford to go to that restaurant any other time. So if you can get the company to pay for it, why not? If it is a company thing, then you may go to that dinner. If you are just planning a dinner for the dinner's sake and there's no work involved, then it is probably not acceptable by that company. So it's your own decision as to whether you want to go or not. Please make sure you pay for your own dinner, because this will become known to management one way or another. You're hiring for a new position, deciding between two candidates. Candidate one is in the late 40s with children, and the other is a recent graduate. Both are qualified. You believe that the candidate who is older with the responsibility of children is more likely to be committed to the company long term and is probably the right choice. Is this reason okay? Is this reason enough to select one candidate over the other? You may not hire somebody based on things such as age, gender, or ethnicity. These decisions must be based on qualifications and merit. It might be at the end of the day that that person is the right candidate, but not for that reason. So your work requires frequent travel. You often find yourself reviewing information about either clients, customers, and projects while at the airport or riding the train. What are the things that you would need to keep in mind? Make sure you take the appropriate steps to protect the confidentiality of all business information in your possession. And don't discuss confidential information in places where you might be overheard. Yes, you might be sitting at the airport, chatting on the phone to your office, but you don't know who's sitting in the chair behind you. Would they be able to use this information under the insider trading rules? Would they be working for a company that is in competition with yours? Just be careful about protecting confidentiality. Okay, so you notice a racially offensive comment from a co-worker on a popular social media site. What do you do? Well, first and foremost, go directly to the source. Go speak to the person, tells directly. It might be appropriate to take it up with your supervisor. It might also be appropriate to take it up with HR. The one thing you wouldn't do is ignore it. So you're working on a big project with a customer in a different country, and you need approval from a government inspector before you can move along. So the customer suggests that you offer him a gift. What should you do? And this is a very real one, but most of us tend to work in various places outside of South Africa. And sometimes offering a gift does grease the wheels of administration. What is the right thing to do? It is very likely to be a bribe that you would be offering, and it is not permitted under any circumstances. Talk to somebody about it, but don't offer bribes. It's a never-ending pit, and it is also against the codes of ethics. Okay, a vendor invites you to a weekend hunting trip. Should you accept the invitation? This is the important one here. Would accepting this gift influence the decision to give future business to this vendor or not? Is anybody else having an issue with sound?
I am, but it could be on my side.
Just to note, I am having long pauses between presenting the scenario and presenting the answer. You don't want to give the appearance of bias. And you certainly wouldn't do anything where accepting would either influence or be seen to influence the decision as to whether you would give this person work next time or not. As the lead supervisor on a new project, your brother-in-law, who is qualified, is looking for a job. Should you hire him? So the short answer here is simply because your friend or relative is qualified for the job doesn't mean that you can't hire them because they are related to you. What you need to do is to disclose this relationship and let somebody else make the decision as to whether they should be hired or not. So you personally wouldn't hire them. You personally wouldn't keep that relationship secret. You would let other people know, and then they might be hired on the basis of their merit for the job. Seeing people reporting work that has not been done. What do you do under those circumstances? Again, firstly, go to the person involved. But because it's a serious situation, you need to also take it further than just telling him about it. Right, so you're working on a project estimation. You notice that the customer has made some errors, and this has resulted in inflated costs. Customer's not likely to pick up the issue since they made it in the first place. And it's going to mean more income for your company. What do? You just say, it's your mistake, you pay for it. Whether it be a customer, a client, contractor, they will appreciate you identifying the issue, and then they will come back a second time. Yes, Ntokoza.
Tanya, with regards to scenario 9, I just would like to ask whether it would be wrong to not raise it with John and discuss it with the supervisor, maybe because John has maybe because John might, John might also frame you for being part of whatever was being done or something like that.
Obviously, the details of the specific situation would identify whether you went to Thomas first, or went to John first, or went to the supervisor first. Your first thought would always be to speak to the person directly and then to somebody else. But depending upon the circumstances, you might need to go to the supervisor first.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, you've been working on a project for weeks and months, and you are so excited about this project and all the hard work that you've done that you tell a friend. Is there anything wrong with that? It might violate insider trading laws and also confidentiality laws or requirements. And if you believe that insider trading has taken place, it is important that you report that up the chain of up the hierarchy. Okay, so you're going to a conference and you get there and you see a former colleague who now works for a competitor. Go out to dinner in the hope of catching up on life and your new projects and everything. What would you need to keep in mind while having dinner with your friend? Yes, you'd limit your discussion to personal matters. You certainly wouldn't talk about your company, projects, contracts. And also you wouldn't ask your colleague about what they are doing to get information upon what they're doing. This situation can actually be quite a serious one if there are two companies who are working in a similar area on a similar commodity. Oh, back in the day, it was standard for De Beers when working in an area where somebody else was prospecting for diamonds. Their employees weren't allowed to go and drink in the local pub because they might say something about their project. Now, while that is an extreme example of how some companies have dealt with it, the reality is you need to be responsible when you're dealing with people from different companies. Personal matters, yes. Potential company matters, no. If you're going to send documents to a new project in a different company, or send geophysical equipment to a different country, and you know that you need certain data, certain licenses, certain forms, what do? Don't guess, find out. Make sure that you follow all the correct exporting procedures. Because if you don't, and it gets stopped at the border, the poor geophysicist accompanying the equipment might land up in a foreign jail, which is never fun. There's also then a financial aspect to that. So you will be involved in not only this, but other circumstances where various forms and procedures are required. Ask, find out what you need, then go along with that. So in conclusion, there are a number of different quotes regarding what ethics is, but probably the most relevant to everyone is this one by Warren Buffett. It takes 20 years to build a reputation, and it takes 5 minutes to ruin it by doing something unethical. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. And that is the importance of professionalism and ethics.